I have to admit those guys are pretty good. Not as good as me, of course.
You don't have to brag to me, Rick. I know all about your winning the amateur flying competition last year.
Actually, I've won it 8 years in a row. What have you been doing?
I was busy fighting a war. I guess you didn't read about my having shot down 108 enemy planes.
You're proud of being a killer?
What? There was a war on and I was a soldier. I just did my duty.
You promised my dad that as soon as the war was over, you'd come back to the air circus. Why did you go back on that promise, Roy?
I really felt guilty about letting your father down. Only, this Robotech thing is so exciting, I just couldn't give it up. It just gets in your blood or something, I don't know.
In an iconic show known around the world, full of iconic images, characters, and moments, it says a lot about him that one of the most memorable of them all is ROY FOKKER. He's one of only a few characters in Robotech whose name wasn't changed from Super Dimension Fortress Macross. Isn't that right, Hikaru? He's one of only a few characters from Macross to show up in another Macross series, a distinguished roster that's smaller than you'd think.
マニュアル大事にしてるやつは早死にするぞ。届け！
He shows up in the background of that awesome Netflix Voltron series, as do one or two other characters, possibly. And then there's that one crazy Voltron crossover. Whoa. Roy was one of the first characters we meet in Robotech, and in the beginning, he's almost the Obi-Wan to Rick's Luke. Not just his friend, but his mentor in helping Rick as he takes his first steps into a larger world. After Rick gets promoted to lead his own squadron, we don't get to see Roy too much, except here and there. But whenever he does show up, he's ever the thoughtful, lovable big brother we met in that first episode. Which is why it hurts so much when, halfway through the series, he's gone. The death of ROY FOKKER in Robotech strongly affected any kid who got up early to catch this show, or rush home from school eager to see what happened next. The episode, Farewell Big Brother, would have aired on television nearly a full year before our generation went through the trauma of witnessing Optimus Prime die on the big screen. Back then, no matter how many bullets were flying around on screen or vehicles got blowed up, people just didn't die. Now, my whole point is, even when they brought over Macross as Robotech to the West, they were still respectful enough of us kids not to talk down to us about the realities of war, about death and loss, and about grief. They were wise enough to remind us that war is not a game.
It has never been a game, Claudia.
So when this particular tragedy hits, it hits hard. No punches pulled, and I hate to say it, but it's far from the last punch this show is going to throw at us. But I've always been curious about Roy and the manner of his death. How much did he realize he was hurt? How well did he know that he was going to die, if he did at all? As far as we could tell, he was such a kind, thoughtful, well-rounded guy, built for leadership and camaraderie, who looked after his men, loved his girl, and was an absolute demon to his enemies. However, it becomes clear later that the Roy Fokker we knew in these first 18 episodes is a very matured version of a rather troublesome youth. One who still felt a sense of duty to do the right thing, but as stressful as that can be, especially for a combat pilot, we find out in a later episode that young Roy dealt with the stress in rather unhealthy ways. In fact, I'd argue that the version of Roy as originally portrayed in Macross was much more blatantly a bit of a womanizer, at least when he was younger, before CLAUDIA. And also a heavy smoker and seemed to hit the bottle more often than we knew. It comes across in the tone and performance of the legendary Akira Kamiya compared to the softer, more familial tone of Robotech's Dan Warren. I'd venture that they wanted to emphasize that mentor role of Roy more for kids in the West, where in Macross, Roy is nearly a parody of what Japan's view was of an American serviceman, of which there are no shortage of, what with the US military presence stationed there, or at least how it might have been in the 70s and 80s. Like I said, hard drinking, chain smoking, and womanizing, from the locals' point of view. And they really lay into it in the Macross Do You Remember Love movie, this idea that Roy had some issues.
The man! You're doing okay. A fighting man needs all of his courage. But you've been drinking. So what? You can still fight when you're drunk?
So why would such a talented, confident guy have any of these heavy crutches to lean on, when on the surface, he had it all? CLAUDIA gives us the answer later in the series, when she regales Lisa with the story of how they fell in love when CLAUDIA was shown the real Roy one rainy night.
Hi. Sorry to ask you out in this raging rainstorm, but I just had to see you, CLAUDIA.
Oh, look at you, you're soaking wet.
Oh, don't worry about it, okay? I shouldn't have come.
Boy, is there something wrong?
Something wrong? Yeah, you might say so. I saw you standing there outside the hangar the other day. Well, it bothered me a lot. It probably didn't mean anything to you, but there's a reason why I act like that sometimes, and I just wanted to explain it to you. See, I've never told anyone my deepest feelings, CLAUDIA, but I want to share them with you. So listen, please. Every pilot has to live with fear, especially because he knows the consequences of the smallest mistake. And every time a test pilot goes up, he wonders if it'll be the last time. But we do what we have to and force ourselves to go up anyway. It can be more dangerous than combat because you have more time to think about what you're doing. And lately, I've become convinced that the next time will be it for me. It'll be the last time.
Why do you do it then? If that's the way you feel about it, to continue is insane. Why don't you just walk away from it? Why keep risking your life expecting to die?
Because I know that the fear is temporary and sooner or later it'll pass, like it always has. So many times before. Besides, who else is gonna do it? I mean, there's a desperate need for experienced pilots. You know that. The war crippled our military capabilities, and those of us who survived that have a responsibility to future generations. Believe me, I can't walk away. Which finally brings me to the reason I came here tonight, CLAUDIA. It's true that in the past I've liked having a lot of girls around, but I can't talk to any of them. Am I being clear? Don't you see? I need someone to talk to about these things, just like tonight, CLAUDIA, and the only person I can think of now is you.
It's okay, I'm here.
CLAUDIA was the one person Roy could be his true self with, the one who would listen to him, who knew that underneath the cool and calm demeanor he projected as a leader, he was as worried as anyone that his next flight could be his last. That, along with the other demons a veteran who's seen war may carry with them, it sort of makes sense that Roy Fokker carried a great weight that grew heavier. Maybe if he'd shared that burden with others more, he wouldn't have been ultimately crushed by it. At least he had Claudia to talk to about these things, and it's wonderful that she was so authentic and loving to listen. And I encourage any of you who carry such weight to seek out a friend, a loved one, a counselor that can help ease that burden. Now, in the novels, there is a little more added to this episode that I thought added a certain extra depth to Roy's state of mind at the time of his passing. In the battle with Miria's Quadranos, Roy is shocked when he sees his longtime friend and second-in-command of the Skull Squadron, Captain Kramer, get shot down, even though he ejects.
Skull leader to group. You guys head on back to Prometheus. I've got some business to take care of in town. Captain Kramer, you take over group command. Over. Roger, Commander.
Roy knew Kramer was a pilot who had more years on him than most, and Roy was determined that Kramer would see another. He flies cover for his lowering parachute, trying to ensure his pal makes it. Because his focus is on protecting Kramer, it makes him careless to watch his own tail, and that's when he takes this hit.
What?
Roy radios for a rescue copter to recover Kramer, and in fact, the port the helicopter exits the SDF-1 from is the opening Miria finds as she enters the ship. Although the rescue helicopter recovers the body, Roy finds out at the battle's end that his friend didn't make it. This pains Roy greatly, enough that he skips out on the medics checking his injured squad members, as all he can think of is that he wanted to be with Claudia in that moment. Of course, we know that the wounds he suffered from that battle in the skies were ultimately what caused his passing. But whether he had any inkling this day was his last or not, I don't think there's an answer. All we know is that he was with the person that made him happiest and eased that weight he carried. When Claudia calls his name, the novel gives us a glimpse at Roy's side of it, as he hears Claudia and wants to answer, but can't. It's almost as if he had another mission to fly. And there was Captain Kramer waiting for him, as well as Rick's father, Pop Hunter, the one who taught Roy how to fly all those years ago. In fact, there were lots of good pilots there, ready to fly this special mission, some of the best Roy had ever flown with. Veterans he hadn't seen in years, but that didn't matter. Pop Hunter handed Roy his helmet, while Kramer slapped him on the back in welcome. This mission would be it, the big one, the last combat mission they would fly, that would end all war in the universe, and then there would finally be peace. Peace forever. And then he could finally hang up his uniform, hold Claudia tightly, and never let her go. Roy and his squadron climbed into the sky as it grew brighter and brighter and flew straight into the center of the increasingly white light. Roy's impact on the series, and all of us who watched it, is immeasurable. I've received a few comments from some of you already mentioning as much. This show taught us about tragedy, adversity, and even joy and love, in a way other cartoons of the era just wouldn't. This episode, really, is the point where this show ceased to be a cartoon and became just real. There's still so far to go, and it's so sad, even making this video, to have to say goodbye to Roy at this point, as Rick, Lisa, Claudia, and the rest still have such a journey ahead. However, as we move on, we shall never forget the legendary Roy Fokker. Farewell, Big Brother.